Hey, what's up? This is Chosen and joined by my friend and teammate, fellow Diablo Immortal content creator, TriggerhappyJon. And in this one, we are going to have a discussion about if you should swap to Demon Hunter, some of the positives, the negatives, and talk about their placing on the current tier list and their skills and all of the things to consider if you are going to be playing that class in the near future. So let's get into it. Alrighty. What's up, John? How you doing today?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
Hanging in there, hanging in there. This will be a fun one because this is the one that I can actually participate in a little bit more because this is the class that I play as well.
I know it'll be fun. We get to actually we may actually get to debate a little bit on this one, just a little bit. But I feel like we're going to be on close to the same page.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll start with having the tier list pulled up. Demon Hunter in a pretty good spot. We just updated this live on stream with some of the people in the Aftershock umbrella, and Demon Hunter coming in at the number 2 spot out of 6 in overall. First of all, do you agree with that placement of the Demon Hunter overall?
I do. I really do. So I definitely agree that Necro was number 1. Demon Hunter, I feel like moving into this, we kind of undervalued what the Demon Hunter could really do, I think. And now that we've been playing the game's been out for over a month, I really do feel like Demon Hunter's kind of slotted in a few areas that some people just did not understand at the very beginning. And now now that we know a little bit more about it, we know like, hey, this is the importance of having a Demon Hunter, especially when doing group play.
Sure. Okay. And then we can go through, are there any individual rankings here on the different areas that jump out to you that you would change if you were in charge of doing like your own tier list or something? Do any of those not make sense to you?
You know, they all make pretty good sense. I feel like the PvP being ranked number 6 is pretty low, to be fair. Because in PvP, I mean, depending on the build that you go with, particularly like the build that I'm going to talk about that I use on my Demon Hunter, you can do so much damage, single target damage, where you can nuke them down very quickly. And if you're lucky enough to pop a Crusader while you're in the battlegrounds with the Demon Hunter, like it's GG as far as just overall output, damage output. So being that they're at a 6, even solo wise, is kind of not quite fair, especially if they're running Gladiator and other aspects, in my personal opinion. As well as the synergy, because I feel like the Demon Hunter can bring a lot to the table with the synergy, mainly, especially because a Demon Hunter is going to always want to be running Bottled Hope, which then helps with all the buffs that the other characters may get as well, right? So it may not be a direct influence from the character himself, but given that the gem that the character is going to be using, because they are a Demon Hunter, I feel like that itself is pretty significant.
I don't like Bottled Hope for Demon Hunter just because
Really?
like it's great. Like if it didn't have the 20-second internal cooldown, it would be God tier, S tier. But because of the 20-second internal cooldown, you're only going to get it for half of your vengeance casts. Like I mean,
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair argument. I feel like that is a fair argument. Obviously, like my setup with my vengeance is going to be a little differently here. So when I actually proc vengeance, my vengeance is active for the 6 seconds. I only have about a 14-second cooldown. If I were to kill 5 to 6 enemies, that increases that even more. So I would actually take more
see,
benefit
now
out
do
of
it
that
again.
bottled
Like do
hope.
your vengeance again right here on cooldown.
Correct.
Yep, so
Now
now you
bottled
don't get
hope
the
is not
Bottled Hope.
procced. Exactly. So that is the difference. So it is a first shot. So it is a one trick pony, so to speak. But that initial damage with some testing I've done is massive in comparison to when it's not active.
Yeah, I still think it's decent. I'm not saying like don't run Bottled Hope, it's trash. But man, can you imagine? It would be godly if you could get it to like every time you pop Vengeance, if Bottled Hope would go off, then it would
Oh,
just
that'd
be
be insane.
yeah. Just something to keep in mind for those of you that are thinking about doing that. As far as like the synergy, I mean, we gave it a 5. This wasn't just my opinion. This was like the different people that kind of work with
Right.
us. 5 is still average. The thing is like Demon Hunter, they only bring like damage, which is great. It's fun to have damage, but they're not bringing synergistic things like a banner or grouping things up or shields for support or tankiness or movement speed like the barbarian. So
Right.
in terms of synergize, it's not horrible because damage is a part of synergizing with your team, but that was the reasoning there. PvP, it's because PvP it seems to come down to CC. Like
Okay.
how brutal can you slow the other team like with the necro? How can you black hole to group them up and burst them down? And Demon Hunter just doesn't have any of that utility, but Demon Hunter does snowball like crazy. Like if your team takes an engagement with an advantage, you are going to crush them because the Demon Hunter will just pop off. But I don't know
Right.
that Demon Hunter can like swing a fight. Like if you're in a fight where you're losing, I don't know that Demon
Mhm.
Hunter can swing it.
Um, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. I think one thing that people also forget too, which is a skill that I don't like to utilize, is daring swing. Daring swing. So, for example, like CC, if you know you're going into it, like if you can see from the, like say the corner of the screen, you can see like a necro or whatever, you know they're about to pop bone pillar. If you pop daring swing, you're actually immune. It negates it, so you aren't affected by it. So I feel like that's also part of a strategy to where that gets them around the CC aspect of it. If that makes sense.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I think we're mostly in agreement here on the rankings. Demon Hunter definitely a solid
Oh, it's
class
definitely a
by
solid build.
yep, by most people's opinions. So, what would you say are the good and the bad about Demon Hunter? So, someone that's thinking about maybe they play a different class, they're thinking about switching over to Demon Hunter now that class swap's available. What would you want them to know as far as the positives and negatives?
So I feel like some of the positive and negatives when talking about the Demon Hunter is the legendary gear pieces that they have. Even though it seems like you have a lot of options, a lot of different changes that can be applied to your character, I feel like there's very few actual builds that are going to feel natural when playing a Demon Hunter. Like they have the recommended builds, and trappers being one of them. I've tried playing as a trapper; it just doesn't feel natural, especially coming from someone like I have a background in Path of Exile. When I've played trapper classes, this is not it. It does not play the same. So you're really kind of hoodwinked, and you're focused really on using only certain abilities here that really stand out. And we'll kind of cover those in a little bit. But I feel like one of the bad things about being a demon hunter is you are very limited on which pieces of gear that you really need for your build to play. But the positive side of this is because you are limited, so to speak, on what builds you want to play as a demon hunter, your damage output and your focusedness is so much higher, right? So it makes it so much easier to go, okay, I got this one legendary piece of gear. I'm probably never going to change it out from this point, and that's going to be definitely kind of a positive as well. Because we've been playing for over a month. I still don't have every single piece of legendary gear, not including the new ones that just came out. So that definitely is an aspect of it. And another aspect is, unfortunately, um, being that we are all damaged, there really isn't a whole lot of support with our build. So that doesn't make us, what would be the word? We're not like a crusader where everybody wants a crusader on their team. You can live without a demon hunter, so to speak. So group play can get a little picky when playing with others. But the damage output, I don't think anyone can outclass this as far as damage goes.
Yeah, well, I would say that's kind of like exclusive to the Crusader because really the only class that's like that is the Crusader where like when you're making groups for
Yeah,
dungeons it's like okay we need a Crusader and we'll take anybody else it's like
right.
so
That's
yeah
fair. Yeah.
but Demon Hunter I think is pretty I mean they all are like as long as you have a Satyr
Yeah.
yeah they all can do pretty good when you're farming like Mad King Breach or whatever so were there any other positives you wanted to talk about?
Um, the ranged about it is pretty cool. I do like that we aren't stuck going head to head with someone. We can actually pop off from the range, and we can use gems that not everyone else can because we do have ranged. Right? There's like I think not for Fang. I think I just sold it, but like Bloody Reach is a gem you can actually utilize, whereas most characters can't because we are a ranged unit. I feel like that's kind of nice because that limits the market, so to speak, on like what we're gonna get. So it's kind of nice to acquire those faster. Um, but yeah, I mean, personally, I just love the aesthetic as well, and the animations and the graphics that go along with the Demon Hunter. I think it's awesome. So
I would jump in and say one of the big selling points for me is it's the
mhm.
only class that can move while firing. Like
Oh,
that's
that's a good point.
super cool. So if you were playing a different class, that'll be something that I think somebody would really enjoy is you can be constantly mobile, constantly kiting, moving, and still cranking out damage from range.
Yep. I would definitely agree with that.
And then yeah, any negatives that people should keep in mind, and a downfall of playing Demon Hunter?
We're squishy, man. We're super squishy. We don't have a whole lot of tankiness to us. So the build for a demon hunter is essentially you go straight up damage. Hopefully you get some life. We don't really the amount of actual armor and defense that we have is pretty minimal. So if you're a player who's not used to like kiting around enemies or not used to like grouping and circling and whatnot, then you're going to maybe struggle just a little bit as a demon hunter. But I feel like it's something that's very easily to overcome within like a few hours of playing actually as a demon hunter. You'll kind of just naturally get that feel because they've done a really good job at it. But it's definitely a downfall, especially when you come from playing a barbarian, for example, or a crusader who can take quite a few hits before they actually die.
Yeah, Demon Hunter is gonna get punished for like if you're in PvP and you take an engagement where vengeance is on cooldown, you're gonna get absolutely destroyed. Your daring swing is easy to get glitched. So yeah, I would say that's a negative. Is you don't have like the barb cheat death or the satyr horse or the necros like shield and escape and pillars, and you have a lot less CC and like manipulation you can do on the battlefield. You're kind of just a glass cannon. It's just your
Yep.
job to hit stuff hard. And if you get in a bad position, you can really get destroyed for that. Would you agree?
Oh, I would definitely agree. That's actually like PvP. I don't think I'll ever get out of the gladiator role just because we are so squishy. This cheat death has saved my life. I don't know how many times because as soon as we pop back up, we pop vengeance, we can usually kill the people who knocked us down. But it's just so squishy that it's rough, man. It's rough out there.
Cool. Now you want to pop up the skills, and we'll go through the different abilities, and I'll let you rank them like S through F on the different choices. Maybe somebody's new to, and they should pay attention to what skills to look out for when they're kind of like leveling and playing through.
Yeah. So luckily, the skills on the Demon Hunter they're fairly straightforward. And being as it is a Demon Hunter, we don't have a whole lot of support skills. So we actually only have one support skill that's really going to be Vengeance, which is at the bottom of the list. So we'll cover that one last, and it's actually perfect opportunity to kind of cover it at the bottom. We'll start with your primary attack. Now, you have two different primary attacks as a Demon Hunter. You have a crossbow shot and you have an explosive arrow. Crossbow shot is usually the primary one that most people use, and that's because you can skill that with other legendary items that really pair well with this particular ability, where you can do damage through additional enemies. That's massive because you can literally stack as much damage as you want on your primary. Because, like Chosen said, as we're walking around as a demon hunter, we're constantly using our primary attack while going forward, making forward progress. So that means if you're just shooting into space, you're constantly hitting more enemies more and more and more. So crossbow shot has become probably the staple of the demon hunter, in my opinion. The only downside of that is it is a variable amount of damage, depending on how lucky you get with RNG and if you crit as well. Because the crit damage will also change because if you get on the lower end of the spectrum for damage, then you get a lower crit than you would if you were on the higher end. It's going to be kind of the same as any ability, though. Explosive arrow is kind of making its way into the meta, I would think, though. I would definitely give crossbow shot an S tier for sure. Explosive arrow, I'm going to go with maybe an A tier, mainly because one thing that the demon hunter struggles with when playing as a demon hunter is targeting an enemy can be super frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. And actually, our good friend Noob Slayer actually did a little bit of a testing with this. And so once he told me about it, I had to go test it for myself. And explosive arrow is a lot easier to actually aim while playing. So you can actually target the enemies a lot better with explosive arrow than you can crossbow shot. However, you do lose quite a bit of damage and that through enemy damage that you would get from crossbow shot, which is kind of unfortunate. But just like anything else, to each their own and the play style. Both primaries, honestly, are going to do you a lot of good and do quite a bit of damage, but I'm definitely going to lean towards crossbow shot being your primary attack that you're constantly spamming as a demon hunter.
Okay, yeah,
When we get
I agree with most of that. Explosive arrow
yeah,
is kind of your AOE You can
Correct.
like if you're doing maybe if you're doing like Elder Rift farming and you're playing a style
Yeah.
where you group up a bunch of stuff and then blast it down, so you're hitting like 40 mobs at once. You might be able to pop off pretty hard with explosive arrow, but yeah, 90 something percent of the time, as of right now, you'd probably want to go with crossbow shot. But sorry, go ahead and keep going down the board.
Yep, yep. No, that's fine. I definitely would agree with that comment as well. Um, Skills wise, this one, daring swing is probably one of the most controversial skills I think for a demon hunter. Me personally, I hate this ability. I will not use it. I don't get any enjoyment out of it. It doesn't play well in my playstyle. Overall concept, application, use as a demon hunter, I got to give the skill an S, because one nice thing about it that's not actually listed here is when you are using Daring Swing, you are not taking damage and you are not taking any type of CC influence as well. When you're in the middle of Daring Swing, you cannot get affected by the Necro's abilities or Black Hole. It doesn't matter. Once you land, however, then you can get affected. But this allows you to kind of get away from that, especially depending on how fast you can proc it and hit it again if you want to really get out of the way for PvP, so to speak. Um, it also allows you to do a little bit of damage, and it's really the only movement skill. It's cooldown of 10 seconds, and that can actually minimize as well depending on what legendary gear you have. So I would still give it an S because it is a movement skill. And when it comes to battlegrounds and even harder content like challengers, because once you get up there and you start pushing them, Daring Swing can be very, very beneficial to you. Me personally, though, I will not use it. Escape is kind of another one where I think if it was modified, if it was changed just a little bit, I think it could be pretty good ability. I'm going to rank this one at about a B tier, honestly, just because jab your blade forward at all enemies in front of you, dealing 6,000 damage, and the movement speed sounds great. However, as a demon hunter, like we talked about before, we're doing a lot of ranged damage. So at what point does this really become beneficial, right? This is going to be a lunge forward and then a backwards movement. So you're going to kind of eliminate your ranged aspect when using escape. So that's why I'm going to give this one a B out of totality, and I don't see a whole lot of people actually using it. Impale is a tricky one. I feel like Impale can go a little both ways. For those of you who have tested it, kind of are aware of like how it works with this whole channeling ability. This is going to be similar to like a wizard who uses a skill that goes into the diamond and refracts and hits other targets. Impale is a channeling ability, so it is something that you acquire time up, and then you get to utilize it, and it'll deplete the bar. Right? It can do a lot of damage, and if you pair the correct legendary items with it, it can really become beneficial to you. However, it's really slow. It's kind of slow to recover quickly, and it's something where you're not going to really out damage, so to speak, like a good crossbow shot with the correct gems. Because Impale is not going to get impacted by like Carson's gem or by anything else that decrease or increases your attack speed, so to speak. So that's where this one I think falls off the board, and I can't rate it that high. Knife Trap, this one I do like Knife Trap. I'm going to give this one an A as far as overall skills utilized and talked about here. Place a knife trap that explodes when an enemy approaches, shooting knives that deal basically 10,000 damage to all nearby enemies. The Demon Hunter is lacking a lot of AoE damage. Knife Trap kind of allows for some AoE damage. It allows for, depending on your playstyle, if you are someone who's going to kite around and move around different areas, so to speak, if you wanted to go ahead and throw that on your bar, you could group people up, place a knife trap, back up, and allow them to actually hit that trap, which then would then cause an AoE explosion and do a lot of damage. You can boost the damage output, and actually you can even increase the amount of traps that can be placed. So I'm definitely going to give this an A because it can be utilized correctly. It's just one of those that I don't feel a lot of people do utilize it, except for maybe in the vault when going against the mortals that are defending.
Yep. I would jump in for Knife Trap and say it has potential to be a really cool skill. It's just unfortunate that it has to be at your location. Like
It is, yes.
I wish the Demon Hunter could like, toss it. Like it's something that would like toss and then deploy, cuz if you were like running and you could like throw it ahead of you 10 yards or something, and then it would fall on the ground and like arm, then it would be like A plus tier. In its current
Oh
design,
yeah.
you're right, it's probably like a B or a C, just because the Demon Hunter likes to stay back. So you end up in this weird situation where you gotta like go forward, place it, then back up, or like, but you're right, in the vault, it is really good. Like if you know someone's gonna be coming at you from a position and you can predict the lane, then yeah,
Yep.
I've put it on my bar a few times when I'm doing the vault.
Yeah, exactly. It's just unfortunate. Maybe one day we'll get a legendary drop. I mean, we just saw they dropped a lot of legendary items. So maybe one of these days we'll get one that actually allows you to place knife trap out somewhere instead of on the character themselves. Let's talk about knockback shot. This is probably, I would say, this is probably my second favorite ability in the game, as far as for a Demon Hunter, which I know is going to be a little controversial. But the reason being is because it gets me out of more jams than anything. There are very few enemies that when you use knockback shot on that don't actually get knocked out or knocked back and pushed away from you. You may kind of wonder like, okay, well, you're a ranged class. Why would you ever need this? Is because sometimes being a demon hunter and having all this damage, you get yourself into a little bit of a bind. You pop knockback shot, and boom, the whole lane opens up. You can get forward, you can maneuver, and allows you to kite around because we're so squishy. Um, as well as there's other legendary gears that modify the amount of damage that this can be done and the cooldown on it. So I do feel like it helps a lot. And they can also be stunned, which is really nice because we don't have a whole lot of CC as a demon hunter. So being able to move them out of the way and then stun them for the 3 seconds is massive for a demon hunter. The next skill that I think is definitely a very positive one, I would rate knockback as an S and multi-shot also as an S tier, is the multi-shot. Its cooldown is 9 seconds. It's pretty fast, especially depending on what shoulder piece that you use, because most of those affect your multi-shot. For example, I'm using Flaming Arrow because we don't have a whole lot of dot damage as a Demon Hunter, so we don't have any really damage over time abilities. However, with the particular shoulder item, I can do Flaming Arrows that do burn damage. Burn damage seems to be massive, and as far as like each tick doing a massive amount of damage. And once again, it's AOE. Demon Hunter's kind of lacking that. However, crossbow shot synergized with multi shot makes for just a massive amount of damage because you can burn them and then keep procking through everybody that's in front of you with the crossbow shot, just destroying everything in your path. Rain of Vengeance, once again, we're going to give this one S tier. This is going to be another semi AoE damage ability. Now, this one gets a little tricky depending on what type of legendary gear you want to use, or if you don't want to use any legendary gear that actually modifies it. What it'll do is it'll put a circle that allows you to place a target, unlike Knife Trap. So that way you do a lot of damage in that area for that circle. However, you can modify it to where it can just be a straight line, which is very helpful, especially in instances like Battlegrounds, where you want to knock down people that are coming at you and you know they're going to be coming in from one instance. Or if you want to close down a lane because they don't want to take damage, they're going to kind of avoid the beasts that are come out of it, depending on the shoulders that you're using. That's super, super helpful and does a lot of damage over time. Sentry, Brad, I think you were using this one quite a lot there at the beginning. Sentry, I think, is a lot of fun as well and has utilization that a lot of people don't really talk about or think about. I'm going to give this one an A tier, mainly because when you're starting out playing as a demon hunter, it can be a little daunting at first because of how squishy you are. And having an ability to place a sentry and then kite around, and while the sentry is doing that damage for you as you're kind of getting the feel for the playstyle, or even depending on the type of boss you're fighting, if you need to kite around, having a sentry that's also doing multiple amounts of damage and taking a little bit of aggro off of yourself is super, super impactful, especially when going against like Path of Bloods or the Challenge Rifts. Brad, I mean, is that something like, I know you have a lot of experience with this particular skill. Would you kind of agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, people hate Sentry in the Diablo. I think it's because it says, 1188 for damage, and that's like a super low number compared to every other skill, so people just assume that it's trash. I don't think Sentry is amazing or anything. I just like I like passive value.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you're adding DPS to the map. So like if I have a choice between Daring Swing and Sentry, if I'm like dungeon farming or something, I'm gonna take Sentry. Now there's other skills you could argue for that spot, like a spinning chakram can do really good if you're aiming it right and stuff like that. I like Sentry because if I'm sitting here for 3 hours, just hanging out with my friends, lazy farming, I don't gotta aim chakrams, I can just plop sentries and add more damage to the map. And it's also really good at bursting down bosses. You got 2 charges, you drop it down on the Mad King, and it just sits there the whole fight, chip damage constantly. So like
Mhm.
it's not that it's amazing or it's S tier, it's just for like the style you're playing, sometimes I think it makes sense to have it. And like you said, people forget about the aggro. Like I've seen rank 1 demon hunters using Sentry in challenge rifts to drop down the Sentry as like a distraction and as some aggro to take some heat off of you. So people forget about that utility, but yeah, I'd probably rank it like high B or low A
Okay.
in its current design.
Yep, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's definitely one of those abilities that a lot of people give a lot of heat towards it, but it can be very well utilized in the right situation. Smokescreen is another buff skill, I guess, that the Demon Hunter has. That honestly, just a whole lot of people just really don't use this ability. I've tried using it, and I don't think it plays well with my playstyle, so to speak. But there are some strategies where you can use Smokescreen, and there's a legendary ability that increases your crit rate if you are using Smokescreen, I believe, as well. It is nice to get yourself out of a jam. However, that 2.5 seconds is just, in my opinion, it's just too low to be worthwhile for anything. So I'm gonna rank this one at like a C tier, just because the overall, like, what you're losing that you could be gaining on your bar just doesn't justify trying to bring in Smokescreen for any type of ability, in my opinion. The next one, Spinning Chakram. This is another fun one. There's a lot of modifications that can be done with Spinning Chakram. And just as it reads itself, launches a Spinning Chakram that deals basically 8,000 damage to all enemies in its path. It kind of works just like your crossbow shot in a directional method. However, it also does damage on the back end when it comes back. So it's really doing about 10,000 damage or so if you line up the attack correctly. And depending on what gear you have, you can actually make that damage do more. Overall, I think it is a very, very solid ability. I currently do not run it on my bar, but I have been known to swap out Spinning Chakram for knockback every so often, especially if I'm doing content that it's necessarily where I'm doing a boss where I can't knock back them. I'm definitely going to switch that out and do Spinning Chakram, for example, like the Shadow Wars or MKB. It's something along those lines where I'm going to be focusing on a main boss. I'm not going to be using knockback. I'm going to bring Spinning Chakram in there all day. Uh, Strafe is another ability that, once again, we kind of talked about the other channeling ability. Strafe is another channeling ability. These have pros and cons built into them, depending on how often and how quickly you need to utilize them, and how long it takes to build them up to be utilized. It's spin rapidly while moving at a 70% reduced speed, so you're not stopped, and you shoot in all directions for about almost 2,000 damage per hit. Um, it is helpful. It's a massive AoE, but once again, we're talking about a character in a class that's a ranged class. Strafe is going to be one of those abilities. If you're going to go up into the center of a mob and then pop Strafe, it's going to hit everything around it, and that's going to do a lot of damage. So Strafe, being as you're always going to be away from the enemies, is not really going to get a good utilization. So I feel like this one I'm going to rank at about a C tier, just because you're not going to utilize this skill very often because of how it works in itself. Um, Last but not least, I think is Vengeance. And I think if we go over my particular build, Vengeance is probably the best skill for the Demon Hunter in the game. Chosen, what do you think? Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, Vengeance is obviously S. It's gonna be tough to justify a Demon Hunter build that doesn't have Vengeance. I don't think I've ever seen like a top player not use Vengeance. Now maybe some build will come out, and that's the fun of a new game, is we're all kind of learning and testing things and theory crafting, and we've got a bunch of new legendaries and stuff. So always keeping an eye out for new things to try. But yeah, Vengeance is just so incredible. And yeah, I agree with your take on most of the skills there. So it looks like your bar has the 3
Mhm.
staples in Vengeance. I can't see it, but it's probably Vengeance, Multi-Shot, and Rain of Vengeance, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and then so in your flex spot, so typically with Demon Hunters, 90 something percent of the time, you'll see them running those 3 skills: Vengeance,
Yep.
Rain of Vengeance, and then Multi-Shot. And then you get a little bit of a difference in opinions on what should be 4th. I know John
Yep.
really loves Knockback Shot. you'll get some people that really love chakram and swear by it, and you'll get some people that like Sentry for like open world farming and tagging mobs, or just being lazy and dropping down sentries for extra damage, or you'll get the people that swap on Daring Swing for the extra mobility and escaping in PvP. So it really just ends up, in my opinion, you can let me know if you disagree, mostly running those 3 skills and then kind of filling in
Mhm.
that flex spot based on what you prefer and what content you're doing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and that's why I was kind of that's why I pointed out kind of one of the bummers about being a demon hunter is you have a lot of these cool, they aesthetically right, they look really cool equipment that you can equip on the demon hunter. However, most of these are just trash right now because you can't synergize correctly with the other skills. So that really limits you to you'll see 90% of most demon hunters running the current skills that or current gear that I have on, with being the primary being an offshoot and the shoulder being an offshoot. But you're almost always going to see the top 2 and this whole right side being the most common skills or common legendary items used for a demon hunter. And that's for most anyone who's doing any type of competitions.
Cool. Okay. Well, I mean that's most of what I wanted to get done here. So any last words or like tips, tricks that if somebody is switching to Demon Hunter, you want to make sure and talk about before we wrap up?
I would say if you're going to swap to the Demon Hunter, and especially depending on the class that you're playing, take a look at your gems. Just make sure you kind of you're prepared. You are going to be switching to a ranged class, which then can utilize different gems. I know, being that I spent quite a bit of money on the game, I'm using mostly 5-star gems, so I don't have to worry about this as much. But as a free-to-play player, sometimes it's nice to make sure you do a little bit of inventory ahead of time, or make sure you can craft the right gems to utilize a character, because you may swap into this and go, oh man, this doesn't do nearly the damage I thought, just because maybe you didn't plan out properly the gems that you're actually using for the character, and that'll make a massive difference. Also, have fun with it. There's no other character out there where you can just sit back and just pop off the entire time, just walking around doing damage and killing all these enemies. So have fun with it. See how far you can go with it. See how far you can push it. And I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment from the Demon Hunter class if you do switch to it.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, John, and I will link to your stuff down below. So definitely check out John's Diablo Immortal coverage as well. And yeah, have a good one. Thanks, John.
Have a good one. Peace.